I had never thought of myself as someone who would end up in a hospital, especially not in the way I did. But I found myself in a situation that even now, I can't quite explain. Started with a routine checkup, or so I thought. I was feeling sick, but it wasn't anything alarming, just a bad cold. Maybe. But my doctor insisted on doing some tests just to be safe. I didn't think much of it at the time, but that's when the nightmare began. The results came back strange. The doctor looked at them, then back at me, and I saw something in her eyes. Something that unsettled me. She called in a specialist, and before I knew it, I was being admitted into a hospital for further tests. I was placed in a small room, not far from the ER, with an old, flickering fluorescent light overhead. The first night, the place was eerily quiet. I tried to sleep, but every little sound seemed amplified. A creak from the hallway, the faint shuffle of footsteps outside my door. But the worst part was the temperature. The air was so cold, and no matter how high I cranked the thermostat, it never warmed up. Around midnight, I heard soft whispers outside my room. At first, I assumed it was just the wind or some other patient talking. But then, the voices began to grow louder, sharper. It sounded like a conversation, though there was something wrong with it. The tone was off, almost distorted. I couldn't help myself. I had to check. I opened the door just a crack, and that's when I saw it. There were no nurses, no doctors. There was just a tall figure standing at the end of the hallway, its back turned toward me. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel its presence like it was pressing against me, suffocating me. I blinked, and it was gone. I slammed the door shut, heart racing, not knowing what to do. The whispers stopped, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching me. I tried to brush it off. I was sick. My mind was playing tricks on me, right? But deep down, I knew that what I had seen wasn't just a figment of my imagination. And that was just the beginning. The worst was yet to come. The second night in that hospital felt even more oppressive. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the air was different, heavier somehow. It was as if the walls themselves were closing in on me. My heart beat faster just thinking about it. I tried to ignore it and focus on getting better, but I couldn't shake the unease gnawing at me. The whispering from the night before lingered in my thoughts, so I stayed awake, trying not to look at the door. It was a restless night. Every small sound, every flicker of the lights made me jump. At around 2 a.m., I heard something that made my stomach churn. A soft, deliberate tapping on the window. It wasn't wind or anything natural. No, this was something else. Someone or something intentionally making that sound. I hesitated. Should I look? Or should I pretend I hadn't heard it? But curiosity and fear got the better of me. I stood up, the cold tile floor sending a shiver through my body as I made my way to the window. When I looked outside, the hospital grounds were empty. Nothing but an empty parking lot bathed in the pale glow of the streetlights. But then, as I scanned the area, I saw it. A shadow moving near the edge of the parking lot, darting between cars. It moved fast, unnaturally fast. Too fast for any person. And that was the moment I realized I wasn't alone. I tried to shake it off, tell myself I was just tired, seeing things, but something inside me knew I wasn't imagining it. I locked the window and drew the curtains, but I couldn't get back to sleep. Around 4 a.m., a nurse came in for my routine checkup. Her name was Lisa. She was kind, smiling gently as she checked my vitals. But when she left, she did something strange. She looked back at me before walking out of the door. I'll never forget the way her face twisted, the way her smile flickered for just a moment, replaced by something I can only describe as dread. I tried to shake off the unease, but when she left, I heard her muttering to herself in the hallway. "It's happening again," she whispered. I thought we had more time. I strained to listen, but her voice trailed off. What did she mean? What was happening again? I had to find out, but I was terrified to ask. By the third night, I was on edge, unable to shake the feeling that something terrible was happening in the hospital. I hadn't mentioned the strange things I'd been hearing to anyone. Who would believe me? The nurses, doctors, they all seemed so normal. But then, why did Lisa act so strange when she left? Why did she look at me like that? Couldn't sleep. I kept my eyes on the door, listening for any sign of movement in the hallway. The whispers from the night before returned, faint but unmistakable. This time, they seemed closer, as though someone was standing just outside my room. I crept over to the door, my pulse hammering in my ears. Slowly, I cracked the door open, peering into the dimly lit hallway. First, I saw nothing, just the dull glow of the emergency lights flickering above. But then I saw them, 2 nurses. They weren't talking. In fact, they weren't moving at all. They stood perfectly still, staring at my door. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. They had their backs to me, but I could see their hands. Their hands were wrong. I could make out the faint outline of something clutched in one of their grips, a dark, shiny object. But it wasn't a medical tool. It looked more like a knife? Couldn't breathe. I wanted to slam the door shut, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from them. There was something terribly wrong with their stillness, something unsettling about their silence. The longer I watched, the more I realized that these weren't normal nurses. They weren't even real people. One of them slowly turned its head toward me. Its eyes were black, empty, hollow. No whites, no pupils, just a deep, endless void. And in that moment, I knew they weren't alive. The figure smiled, or at least it tried to. Its lips peeled back to reveal too many teeth, sharp and jagged. And then it whispered my name. "Ethan?" I gasped, stumbling backward. But the figure didn't move. The other one started to sway, as though it were rocking back and forth in place. Then they both turned and walked away, their footsteps eerily quiet, despite the click of their shoes on the tile floor. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what was real anymore. I stayed locked in my room, terrified to move. The coldness from the night before had returned, settling in the very air around me. I could feel it creeping under my skin, making my heart beat faster. I didn't know if I was still in danger or if I was just losing my mind. Either way, I had to get out. I tried to leave the room the next day, but when I opened the door, I was met by a nurse, another one I hadn't seen before. He looked at me with a faint, almost apologetic expression. He didn't say a word, but he reached out to gently push me back inside. "No one leaves yet," he said softly. I tried to protest, but the cold grip of his hand on my arm silenced me. Something in the way he held me told me that I wasn't allowed to leave. Not yet. The next few hours were a blur of confusion and fear. The nurse, the one who had pushed me back into my room, never let go of my arm. He led me to the bed, his grip tightening as if he was afraid I might escape. He didn't say a word. He just kept watching me, his eyes unervingly calm, too calm. I tried to speak, to ask him what was going on, but my voice felt like it was stuck in my throat. When he finally let go of me, he turned and left without a word. The door clicked shut behind him, and I was alone again. But the silence felt heavier than ever before. It was suffocating, like the walls were closing in on me, like the very air I was breathing had become thick and poisonous. I lay there, wide awake, staring at the ceiling, the faint buzzing of the fluorescent light the only sound filling the room. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something was waiting just outside the door, biding its time. It was well past midnight when I heard it again, the whispers. But this time they weren't coming from the hallway. They were coming from within the room. I jumped out of bed, my heart hammering in my chest. I searched the room, but there was nothing. Nothing but the empty bed, the stark white walls, and the eerie stillness that hung in the air. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me like a storm, and then I heard a voice. "Ethan." It was a soft, familiar voice. It sounded like Lisa, the nurse who had checked on me earlier. But it wasn't her voice. I could feel it in my bones. It was the voice of something that wasn't human. I backed away, my mind racing. The voice grew clearer, closer, and in an instant, I realized something far worse. It wasn't just the voice of Lisa. It was her, but something was off. The voice was too high-pitched, too distorted, as though it were trying to mimic her, trying to deceive me. I stumbled backward, my legs too weak to hold me. The door opened slowly, and there she stood. But this wasn't Lisa anymore. Her face was pale, almost ghostly, her eyes hollow and dark like the nurses from the night before. Her mouth twisted into that same horrifying smile. "Don't you remember?" she whispered, her voice vibrating with something dark and unnatural. "You can't leave. None of us can leave." My heart skipped a beat. I turned to run, but the moment I stepped forward, something gripped me from behind. Cold hands, not human, pulling me back. I felt their cold fingers wrap around my throat, choking me, pulling me down. I fought against it, my heart racing in terror. I managed to break free and scrambled toward the door, but the hallway outside was no longer the same. It stretched on endlessly, and the walls, they were covered in dark, wet stains. I could hear the whispers coming from all around me, echoing through the twisted corridor. "Help me! Help me!" I turned and ran as fast as I could, but every step felt heavier, like I was wading through thick mud. I tried to scream, but my voice was swallowed by the darkness that seemed to press against me from all sides. The air smelled like decay, like something was rotting just beneath the surface. And then I saw them, the nurses, the ones I had seen before standing in that hallway. They were blocking the only way out, their dark eyes trained on me, watching my every move. One of them, Lisa or what was left of her, stepped forward. "You can't leave, Ethan," she said softly, her voice ringing in my ears like a death knell. "You're already one of us." Before I could move, she lunged at me. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the cold, dead hands grabbing me, pulling me into the darkness. That was my last night in the hospital. I don't know how I woke up, how I got out of there, or even if I really did escape. All I know is that when I opened my eyes again, I was outside, far away from that place. But even now, years later, I still hear those whispers. And I know one thing for sure, they'll never stop coming. They're always waiting for me to come back, and they will. Years passed since I escaped that hospital, or at least I think I did. The truth is, I've never been sure. I've tried to move on, got a new job, made new friends, but no matter where I go, I can still feel the hospital lurking in the back of my mind. It's there, just beneath the surface, like a dark cloud waiting to rain on me. Lately, I've been having dreams, vivid, terrifying dreams of the place. The hallways stretch on forever. The nurses, their faces twisted with that same hollow smile, and always that voice calling my name, whispering in the dark. It wasn't until one fateful evening that I received the phone call. The caller ID said unknown, and I almost didn't answer, but something inside me, something dark, something that had been clawing at me for years, compelled me to pick up. "Hello," I said, my voice trembling. A cold, familiar voice answered. It was Lisa's voice, but it was different. It was distorted, as if the words were being choked out from the other side of some invisible barrier. "Ethan," she whispered, "we've been waiting for you." My heart stopped. It felt like the air around me thickened, like the room was closing in. The voice was unmistakable. It was Lisa, but not the woman I had once known. This was something else, something that had taken over. I hung up immediately, my hands shaking. I looked around the room, feeling like I was suffocating. I told myself it was a prank, a bad dream, but I knew deep down that it wasn't. I tried to go about my day, but the nightmares grew worse. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the hospital. I could hear the whispers again, louder this time. I could feel the presence of those nurses, those things, stalking me, waiting for the moment when I would finally return. One night, unable to take it anymore, I drove. I drove for hours, not knowing where I was going, but just needing to get away from everything. The city, the people, the constant dread gnawing at my soul. And then, I found myself back at the hospital. It was abandoned, or so it seemed. The sign outside was rusted, barely legible, but there was no mistaking it. This was the place. I stepped out of my car and approached the entrance, the air colder than it should have been for a spring night. As I pushed open the door, the creaking sound echoed in the empty building. The hospital was as I remembered it, dark, decaying, and dead silent. But something was different. The air had changed. There was a weight to it, a heaviness that I couldn't explain. I walked down the hallway, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The light overhead flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. The smell of something rotting filled the air. I tried to turn back, but my body wouldn't listen. It was like the hospital had a hold on me, pulling me deeper into its dark heart. Then I heard it, the whispers, louder this time, coming from all directions, from every room, from the walls themselves. But then, amidst the whispers, I heard a voice. Ethan. It was Lisa again, but this time it wasn't distorted. It was calm, soothing, like she was waiting for me. I turned a corner, and there they were, the nurses, all of them, standing in the hallway, their faces obscured by shadows. But they were real, or at least they felt real. You shouldn't have come back, Lisa said, stepping forward from the group. Her smile was wide, too wide, as if her face had been stretched to fit it. I tried to speak, to run, but the moment I opened my mouth, the words were swallowed by the darkness. The nurses stepped forward, their cold hands reaching out to me. Once you enter, Lisa whispered, her voice laced with malice, you can never leave. And just like that, the walls closed in around me, and I was consumed by the hospital once again. It's been months since I returned to the hospital, though time no longer feels real. The days blur into one another, indistinguishable from the endless nights that stretch on forever in the hospital's decaying halls. I don't know how long I've been here, whether it's been days, weeks, or even years. It doesn't matter anymore. The hospital is my prison now, and no matter how hard I try, there's no escaping it. I've wandered the hallways, looking for an exit, searching for a way out, but I've only found more darkness, more corridors that twist into other corridors. The hospital is alive in a way. It shifts, breathes, and changes with every step I take. Rooms appear and disappear. Sometimes I'll stumble into a room that wasn't there before, and other times the room I just left is gone, replaced by another just like the last. The nurses, they're always watching. I can feel their presence, feel their eyes following my every move. I try to hide, but they always find me. They know what I am, what I've become. I remember the first time I saw them again after I returned. I was in a room that felt like it could have been an old office, the walls lined with shelves of forgotten files. It was quiet, too quiet. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw them standing in the shadows. Their faces were pale and lifeless, their eyes hollow, their mouths twisted into grotesque, unnerving smiles that stretched too far. It wasn't just Lisa anymore. There were others, more of them, and each one looked like they were waiting for something. Why did you come back? One of them asked, its voice dry and cracked, like it had been buried under layers of dust and decay for years. Did you think you could escape? I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. The hospital had already claimed me. I was just another lost soul, another victim trapped within its decaying walls. Once you're here, Lisa said, her voice laced with that familiar, mocking sweetness, you belong to us. There is no leaving. There is no end. The truth settled over me like a weight. I had never left the hospital. The moment I thought I escaped, I had only wandered deeper into its twisted heart. Now I'm part of it. Took me days to realize that the hospital wasn't just a place. It was an entity, a hungry, insatiable entity that fed off the fear, the sorrow, the despair of everyone who entered. It twisted their minds, their souls, until there was nothing left but the desire to consume others, to trap them within these cursed walls. The nurses, they weren't human anymore. They were creatures, things born of the hospital's dark magic, its unholy energy. I've tried everything to escape. I've screamed, I've fought, but no one hears me. No one sees me, not in the way that matters. I'm still here, in this twisted version of the hospital. Every time I think I've found the way out, I only find myself deeper within it. And I'm not alone. I know what I have to do. I have to keep fighting, keep searching. I can't let the hospital win. But there's something worse. Something I fear more than the nurses or the endless corridors. I've started to forget who I am. The memories are slipping away like sand through my fingers. The longer I stay here, the harder it becomes to remember the life I had before. My name, my face, everything that made me Ethan is fading. I'm becoming one of them, but there's still a sliver of hope left. There's still a chance I can escape, even if it's just a fleeting moment. But if you're reading this, if you hear my voice, remember, the hospital is always waiting, is always watching, and it will never let you leave, not if it can help it. Did you like these stories? Write in the comments. And please write what you didn't like. It will be useful for me to know your opinion. And I will improve my work. Thank you. Subscribe to my channel and click the bell so as not to miss new stories. I try for you.